Hi guys, and welcome to Anew Dawn. I am Dawn, and if this is your first time watching my video, thank you for joining me. If you are a returning visitor, thank you so much for coming back. Today, I wanted to kind of take a different spin on things. I know that I've spent a lot of time talking about some of my past experiences with DV, with being digitally stalked, overcoming all of that, right? Being a survivor of domestic abuse. And it's important to me to talk about these things. I am very encouraged to continue pushing forward with my platform on those topics because I have gotten some amazing feedback from my friends and family and just a lot of support about being courageous and talking about these things, but really just kind of shining some light and potentially helping someone who is currently in a situation. So I'm going to continue to share my story, but today I want to take just a slightly different turn and I want to shift gears to talk about some other things that are important to me. So I have mentioned in some of my previous videos that I am a foster parent, and today I wanted to just briefly kind of talk about what went into my decision making to become a foster parent. My goal is to adopt, so that is for sure 100% the end game for me. But when you're fostering, sometimes it can be a much longer process than just initially going straight into adoption. Not to say that that process cannot be long, but it's just a different route. And I wanted to just spend some time today talking about really what went into my decision to do that. So y'all can see I have a full face of makeup, and sorry guys, I just realized I had lipstick on my teeth. Wow. Anyway, so if you didn't know, I'm not a bot. I am 100% a real person, and this is my real life. So I do have a full face on, but I am going to actually do my face in this video. So I got a mystery box from one of the product lines that I use quite frequently, and there's some colors in there that I have never tried before. So I wanted to try a new eye, and the lip also came in the mystery box, which I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of digging it. Outside of the fact that I had lipstick on my teeth, I'm actually kind of digging the look. So let me know what y'all think below, and let's get into it. Okay, so let's go back in time just a little bit. Remember, I told y'all I have fibroids. Well, I probably found out about my fibroids when I was in my 20s. I actually was on birth control, and at the time I found out I had my fibroids, I wasn't having a period at all. But I found out during a routine annual exam, and they were having trouble finding my cervix. Long story short, they were having trouble finding my cervix because I had a fibroid blocking it. Just a little side note, I was at Planned Parenthood at the time. So I didn't have any money and I didn't really have health insurance, but I obviously still needed to be cared for. So this was my OB/GYN at the time. When I found out about my fibroids, I was told, if they're not bothering you, we don't bother them. Sidebar, that was the worst advice ever. And I'll get to that in another episode. But at the time, like I said, I wasn't even having a period. So I had probably been on birth control for 10 years altogether. I don't even remember what my period was like before birth control, But I do remember when I got on birth control, immediately my period went down to 3 days, and it was super light. And over the years, it just eventually disappeared. Like, it literally just went away. I had no period, and I had no period symptoms. In hindsight, this is when my fibroids started to grow. And of course, I didn't know because, again, I didn't have any symptoms to know. But by the time I had symptoms, which again was probably about 10 years later, to me, I feel like it was too late, right? What happened is I stopped taking the pill, and I had what I call this new period, right? My period was so heavy. My cramps were just terrible. It literally was the worst thing I ever felt in my life. I was nauseous, extremely uncomfortable. It just was a lot to deal with, and it was only for 4 days, but it was bad, y'all. I eventually found a new OBGYN, right? And long story short, and I've talked about this before, I ended up deciding to have a myomectomy, which is a procedure to remove the fibroids. And the entire purpose of it is to preserve your uterus so that you can try to have children. So of course I went with that. Now I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. It was about 3 years after having my surgery where I discovered that my fibroids came back. And I shouldn't say came back. I grew new fibroids, right? My original surgery, I had 4, and they removed 3. The largest one was larger than a grapefruit. And then I had one that was the size of a grapefruit, and the third one was probably the size of an orange. 3 were removed. The 4th one was very tiny, but it was close to my ovaries, and I don't think she thought she couldn't get it out safely. So we left that one in, and I was told we'll keep an eye on it. So again, fast forward 3 years, more fibroids came back, and to me, they came back even worse. Like, it was like, they came back with a vengeance. My periods got longer. My cycle was even heavier than it was before surgery. The cramps, the PMS, it was unbearable, right? Like, it was just unbearable. It was crazy. In around 2016, I think 2016, I, at the time, was in Dallas, and I found an OBGYN then. Long story short, I talked to her about my history. I discovered that I had these fibroids. I wanted to have another procedure, so I set up a second myomectomy. She told me that she could do it robotically, remove the fibroids robotically. And what ended up happening is that during the procedure, she couldn't get them out. And I didn't know until after I woke up. But she told me the fibroids were on the outside of my uterus, and there was nothing embedded within the lining of my uterus. There was nothing obstructing anything. So she didn't take any out and felt like it should be okay for me to try to conceive. Like, there would be no reason why I couldn't. I was in my 30s at the time. So with her, she did recommend that I start a pill called Clomid. And y'all remember 2016, I was in Dallas. I was with my ex when I was in Dallas. I was with my ex when I went to have this procedure. I was with my ex when I started Clomid. And yes, he knew. We were actively trying to have a baby together, right? Because remember, I said he told me he also wanted a family. So we were trying. I was on Clomid. Clomid is something to help you, assist you with ovulation, right? I remember I had to monitor when I was ovulating, and then I had to go in to her. So anyway, I was on Clomid for a couple months. To be honest, it made me sick, but I was still willing to take it. What ended up happening is right before I moved to Houston, right before we moved to Houston, my ex, his brother was killed. It was a bad situation for everybody. He was killed. Obviously, it took a toll on the family. It took a toll on him. And it was right before we moved to Houston. And then remember, when I moved to Houston in 2017, I moved during Hurricane Harvey, right? So it was a natural disaster that came through and just destroyed everything. So it was like a lot going on. And because it was also making me sick, I kind of just put a pause on taking Clomid, right? And I knew I was moving and I needed to find a new doctor, so I kind of just put a pause on it. Now, remember when I said we were in Dallas, I have admitted that it wasn't perfect. Our relationship, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. And we were trying to have a kid, so it wasn't terrible. But when we went to Houston, things just went sideways, and they just went sideways quickly because we moved during Harvey. And one of the major things that happened right away is his car was flooded in that time. We weren't physically in Houston when Harvey hit. But we had been down there because we were transitioning down there. So we had been there for a week, the week that it was coming. We ended up leaving one of the cars there, which was his. We went back to Dallas to get the rest of our things. And we were stuck for about a week before we could get down there because Harvey hit. So when we came, the car was flooded. At the time, I felt like these things that had just happened over those last couple months was the jump off to the nightmare. But in hindsight, and I mentioned this in another video, this guy was always like that, right? Like, the ugly didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't just this event that brought out this monster. He had it in him the whole time. But anywho's, I digress. So in Houston, I ended up finding a new OBGYN. It wasn't, again, in my head at the time, I felt like it wasn't terrible in the beginning, but it just wasn't great. And it didn't matter because I was still wanting a family, right? So I was like willing to do anything, okay? So I found a new OBGYN in Houston, and I told her about my history. I told her my desires to want to have children. She was actually the first person who asked me about my partner and had he been tested, right? She explained to me that a woman being infertile is a lot harder or more challenging than male infertility. And I didn't even realize that at the time. But with male infertility, you literally can change your diet, you can stop smoking and exercise in order to kind of rectify that. Women who are infertile sometimes are having to have surgery. Sometimes there is no cure, okay? So she is the one who encouraged me to have him tested. And basically, I found out that the motility rate was low and he had a low sperm count. So he was considered infertile. And it wasn't just me, okay? And of course, a sidebar, he always made me feel like it was. So I told y'all in an argument, he was the type who would very much use things that I was insecure about against me, right? To make me feel worse. So he always made me feel like I was the reason. Me gaining weight was the reason. Me not exercising was the reason. I mean, just anything. And maybe all the while it wasn't me at all. Anyway, I digress. So eventually what happened is things in our relationship just continued to get worse. And I got to a point where even though I wasn't brave enough, I think, to end the relationship, because I remember I said I felt like I got myself into a mess. I feel like I let the devil into the front door. I did not want to have a kid with him. Like in the beginning, I felt like I could do it and bounce, right? And I'm just telling y'all honestly how I felt. But then I got to a point where I felt like there's no way I could have a kid with this guy. And not only do I not want to have a kid with this guy, I just stopped wanting to have a kid altogether. And it made me really sad. It probably made me depressed because, again, this whole time my biological clock was ticking. I felt like I was on a time frame with my fibroids, and like I always wanted to have a kid. But when I was with him, I just got into a place where I didn't want that anymore. So I lost the desire to do it. Fast forward, when the relationship ended, I kind of revisited that because it's never anything that I stopped thinking about. I always wanted to have kids. I always wanted to have a family. And I just felt like, why did I let him take that away from me? Why did I let him take my dream away from me? And I realized that, I mean, yeah, it's ideal to start a family with two people, but it's not necessary. And because I was still dealing with my fibroids and still having so much trouble with that, eventually I ended up having a hysterectomy. So I knew there was no way I was going to have a child naturally anyway. And I had come to terms with that. So I decided, what are my other options? Well, I could consider IVF, but I felt like even when I was with him and after we broke up, I just felt like before my hysterectomy, my uterus was trash, right? So it would not be a good place for a growing baby. That's just how I felt. So that was out. I considered a surrogate, but at the time I was single. So I would also have to consider a sperm donor. And I didn't want to do that either. So adopting became the answer. Adopting became the choice for me. Now, in making that decision, I linked up with the agency that I'm currently with, and they kind of helped navigate me to the decision to foster, to adopt. And basically how I came to that decision was, with fostering, there's no upfront cost. It costs you $0. In fact, the state will pay you to take classes, and they give you a stipend essentially for caring for the child. So there's no upfront cost. For me, because I was going into it single, I just had a fear of being overlooked because I was single compared to a 2-family home. So fostering kind of took that away because there are so many children who need a loving home and a safe place that I knew my chances were a little bit better. Now, with fostering, I'll tell y'all, the goal is reunification. It is always reunification, really, until it's not. So it's an entire process. The kids, when they go into custody or go into the system, as some people like to say, the state gets temporary custody of them. The birth parents are given a case plan to try to reunify, and they have a certain amount of time to fulfill that. If they cannot, the child, kids, baby, whatever, goes into permanent custody of the state. And at that point, the child becomes eligible to adopt. This could take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years before they can become eligible to adopt. It really just depends on the case. And then once they're eligible to adopt, if they are a foster child, the foster family is usually the first family considered. So that's it. That's really how I came to the decision to foster to adopt. It has its ups and downs. It's definitely not for the weak. But I would love to share my journey with you guys. So stay tuned. All right, guys. So here we are again. Final look. Oh my gosh. I really love this lip, but I'm going to tell you right now, I have to constantly check my teeth because I have lipstick everywhere. For any of my followers who are makeup artists, leave me a comment below and let me know, how can I ensure that my lipstick isn't bleeding all over the place? I think that I probably need to apply a lip primer, and normally I do. I skipped that step this time. Wow, what a tongue twister. But if that's a step that's not skippable, y'all let me know. Let me know in the comments below. Because I think I really like this color. I don't want to check my teeth all the time. And how embarrassing would that be if I'm having a conversation with lipstick all over the place? Anyway, here's the final look. Thank y'all so much for tuning into my video. I never thought that I would be in a position where I'm choosing to be a single foster parent, right? It was a tough decision. It was a tough decision knowing that I'm going in it alone. But it is by far the best decision that I have made in my entire life. So I have no regrets. I am actually going to take a slight hiatus. I am in the process of moving. So where I currently live, me and my foster child have outgrown our space. With that being said, again, I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. But I may be on a slight hiatus just for a couple weeks. Give me a little time to transition into my new place, and I'll be back with more. In the meantime, let me know what y'all think below. Let me know what y'all think of this look. Let me know what you guys want to hear next. Let me know what y'all got going on for the summer. All right, I will talk to y'all soon. Love you guys. Bye.